I would like to request Professor Rajesh Bhatt to talk on this topic, very interesting topic on some putative expletives in Hindi. And I remember Rajesh in the early 90s as a very young, very dynamic, very talkative, enthusiastic student. I mean, so now Professor Rajesh Bhatt, after completing his BTech in computer science from IIT Kanpur in 1993, where Professor Sangal was his undergraduate thesis director, he went to get his PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania in 1999. And from 1999 to 2004, he was an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin. And since 2004, he has been at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where he is currently a professor in the Department of Linguistics. He has been a visiting professor at MIT and has taught a number of summer schools. And his research interests lie in the syntax semantics interface, the comparative syntax of modern Indo-Aryan languages, and resource creation for South Asian languages. So together with Professor Deepti Sharma, who was part of the NSF-funded Hindi Urdu Tree Bank project. I now request Professor Rajesh Bhatt to deliver his talk.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Full screen. Okay. Is this visible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start. I'm delighted that I was asked to speak at this event. I really wish I could be there in person. So before I launch into my technical talk, I just wanted to share a little bit with you all, because it's not very often that you can say that meeting someone or working with someone changed your life, that you would have been a very different person doing very different things if you had not met a certain person. But for me, that is absolutely a fact with Professor Sangha. So June 1991, or maybe it was May 1991, this was after in IIT in the first 2 years, you don't really do much of your area. You're just doing all kinds of courses. I was kind of lost, but I had heard that Dr. Sangal had been doing very interesting work on NLP. So I applied for a summer project, and I think this was on the Anusarak project. And I was delighted because, well, I'll explain why. I was surprised that I got it. So when I got it, I worked with Dr. Sangal and Dr. and Chaitanya ji, and what I was asked to do was to read the syntactic literature and consider its connections to the Paninian grammar framework that was being developed at that point at IIT Kanpur. So I read so my first linguistic theory was the Paninian grammar framework. The second was tree adjoining grammar, and after that, everything else. So I think it's a fact that doing this project changed the course of my life. When I did this project, I really didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything about language or linguistics. In a very genuine sense, I didn't really have a project. In fact, I'm not even sure I was doing, a bachelor's in computer science, but up until that point, I didn't even know why I was doing it. I was doing it because I got into IIT and that was what I was doing. But this gave me working on this project suddenly made everything make sense. It just gave me, it gave me a mission, and it gave me ideas. It gave me a topic. And all of that is due to Professor Sangal and the ecosystem he created. A lot of, in the previous, many people have talked about the environment, right? And one of the beautiful things about that environment was that even though I was in a computer science department and Dr. Sangal is a computer scientist, there was never any pressure to do X or Y. It just had to be interesting things. And in this, I have to also mention that one of the things that Dr. Sangal did was to put me in touch with Arvind Joshi, whose name we heard when Dr. Raj Reddy mentioned him. And I really feel that there's an lineage of intellectual freedom, of passion for exciting ideas. And it doesn't matter where those ideas take you, you just follow them. So as Professor Vasudev Verma said, basically, most of the people that have worked with Dr. Sangal are primarily working in NLP. That's not the case for me. My primary contributions have been in the syntax semantics interface and in the comparative syntax of modern Indo-Aryan, though one of the places where I have actually engaged in resource creation, NLP adjacent work is via IIIT, where I worked with Professor Sharma, and that was another wonderful reconnection. So it was like being a child and then growing up and coming back home and having grown up a little bit and then engaging with your mentors. So this was also an absolutely wonderful experience for me, and I am so very grateful. It is absolutely the case that if I had not done this project, I would not have been a linguist today. I'm very grateful that you took me on and you let me roam wild. So thank you very much. And now I will show you some things which I feel connect with some of the ideas that we talked about, though in a very sort of higher abstract way, not very directly, but let's look at these things. Okay, so one of the interesting things about the Paninian grammar system, as opposed to, say, most grammatical systems that have been set up for languages like English, is that those systems, the systems that have been set up for languages like English and German and so on and French, they are structural. They use structure to identify specific positions. In contrast, the Paninian system, you can think of it as being more relational. Structure has no primitive position. In fact, one of the things that we discussed a lot, and I know people at IIIT, I was part of the thesis committee of a student of Dr. Sharma, who were exploring to what extent can you model structure using the Paninian system. Okay, so given that, expletives, words like it and there, they have played an enormously important role in syntactic theory because they establish the independence between structural positions and meaning. So, for example, when you have it is raining or there's a cat in the hat, the general consensus about these is that it and there don't mean what they normally mean here. They're just there. Okay, and why are they there? And it has to do with structure. Languages like English have a subject position, and they have a requirement that that subject position must be filled. So you can't just say is raining or is a cat in the hat, even though these things make perfect sense. You would understand what this would mean. You just can't say that. Okay. So what it and there are doing is the language says you need to put something here. And well, you put it and there. So that's kind of what expletives are doing in English. Okay. So now we come and look at Hindi. And remember, so the first point is, as far as we know, the kinds of expletives that you see in English, we don't have them in Hindi. So if you say kamre mein chuha hai, you will note that in the translation there's a there into English, but there is no there in the Hindi construction. Likewise, when you're talking about rain, barish ho rahi hai, there's no it in the Hindi. Okay. So given the motivation that I set up for expletives, now at this point you should sort of might say, well, maybe what about what's going on? What about the subject position? And this is, I think, one of the deep insights in the Paninian system, the observation that unlike English and, say, languages like German, there is really no clear evidence for a structurally distinguished subject position. There's a lot that you can find evidence for other kinds of things, but structurally distinguished subject position, there is no evidence for that in Hindi or any other Indo-Aryan language, with the possible exception of Kashmiri. Okay, so there's just, it's a very deep fact. And it's also, you see that Panini, who was a very smart person, came up with all kinds of beautiful ideas, but he does not have a subject. He does not have the primitive notion of subject. So since in Hindi, we don't have a subject position, that we need a structural subject position, we don't need expletives, because what would you do with them, right? The idea is that the subject is there, the expletive is there to take care of subject positions. Okay, so now I've set the stage. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some things which could be expletives. Okay, so my first candidate is this construction, a funny construction in Hindi, where you can get a yeah, which is the proximal demonstrative, this, in a question. And it doesn't seem to be an event participant. It's not clear what it's doing. So you can have sentences like, ये तुम किससे बात कर रही हो? ये हम कहाँ आ गए हैं? So this yeah is not, if the sentence would be perfectly grammatical if you remove the yeah. तुम किससे बात कर रही हो? हम कहाँ आ गए हैं? These are fine. And just that and what I'm going to show you is that you can do this with a range of things. ये तुमने कितने स्वेटर खरीद लिए? ये तुम मीना से कैसे बात कर रहे हो? और ये तुम कब से यहाँ बैठे हो? ये राम यहाँ क्यों आया है? Right? What is yeah doing here? This is one of the things I want to understand, because there is this idea, and there's something called the theta criterion in generative linguistics, and within the Paninian model, there is this idea that whatever karak roles must be assigned, and then if you have things in there, you have to connect them with a karak role to the main predication. So how can you have an element which is just hanging out there and is not obviously connected to anything? So I want to show you that there is this. Okay, one more thing. I've already told you, well, so semantically, in some ways, this element seems like an expletive. Why is it there, though? For English, it and there, we had a structural motivation that we don't have here. So what's going on? So the hope is that maybe this yeah is not really an expletive. Maybe it has some semantic impact. So here's an initial observation, that if you have an ordinary question, then you can have a negative answer. That is, if you say, darwaza kaun khटखटा raha hai, who's knocking on the door? So you ask me this, but I can say, अरे कोई नहीं है, just हवा चल रही है. So it's no one, it's just the wind. Okay. But if you prefix this thing with ye darwaza kaun खटखटा raha hai, then you get a meaning. Then it seems I've changed the translation, something like, who is this that is knocking on the door? So the speaker has some evidence that there is someone knocking on the door. And so given that, it's no one, it's just the wind, does not seem completely like a reasonable or a possible response here. Okay. So here's a thought. And the idea is, we don't want expletives. You want to get rid of expletives because some of the motivations that we have for expletives in languages like English, we just don't have them here. Okay. So The thought here is that maybe what ye is doing is it's anchoring, it's giving here ye, it's a proximal demonstrative. It's basically saying this situation that I am in, okay? I'm talking about this situation. I'm not talking about the entire world. So what it's doing is it's taking the question and it's restricting itself to this situation. Okay. And then once it does that, then look at this example in 8. ये हमारी ट्रेन कहाँ आ गई है? Right? Now, in this case, you are there. In this case, you are in that situation, and ye is talking about a particular situation. So now you're not just asking about where. You know where is, where you are, but you're asking something like about the identity of the location, right? You can be in a such place, you know where you are, but you don't know what it's called. And that's kind of what's going on. That's what I think is going on. Okay, so that's one case. So this is, I think, the slightly easy case. Now I'm going to show you another case where I hope the same kind of story can be told, but I don't know yet how to tell it. Okay. So my first putative expletive was yeah. My second candidate for an expletive in Hindi is koi. Okay. So first, koi, some background on koi. Koi is ordinarily an existential quantifier in Hindi. It's not an expletive. It's an argument generally. So Veena se koi baat kar raha hai. Someone is talking to me now. Kya aaj koi aayega? There should have been a question mark here. Will anyone come today, or will someone come today? Aaj koi nahi aayega. No one will come today. Okay. So in each of these cases, it's basically giving you the meaning of someone, which is then combining with everything. So sometimes you get someone, anyone, no one, but underlyingly, in all of these cases, you have the same meaning of someone, and it's combining like an existential quantifier. It is not an expletive. It is in this case, in fact, in all of these cases, it's the subject of, yeah. Okay, so now let me show you the case of koi, which has been bothering me. Okay, so look at 10. Koi tumhe ye kaam thodi karna hai. Some people might say thode hi. Koi tumhe ye kaam thode hi karna hai. You don't have to do this work. Or let's look at the next example. So 0 Dark 30 was a movie that was popular some time ago. 0 Dark 30 कोई पाकिस्तान में थोड़ी शूट हुई थी. So once again, now compare the koi in 9 and the koi in 10. The koi in 9 was an argument. The koi in 10 is not an argument. One way we can see it is that you can just subtract the koi altogether and the sentence will be fine. तुम्हें ये काम थोड़ी करना है. 0 Dark 30 पाकिस्तान में थोड़ी शूट हुई थी. The role of koi is quite mysterious here. So in that sense, it's expletive-like. It's not an event participant. Normally, it's an event participant, but here it's just sprinkled in the sentence. It's doing some work. I've not actually been able to pin down exactly what it's doing. Okay, but there is one very interesting fact. Koi is a word which does not normally need negation. So you can say, Veena se koi baat kar raha hai. This is a positive sentence. Okay. But in these sentences in 10, I told you that I can remove koi and the sentence stays fine. But I can try one other thing. I can remove thodi and the sentence becomes quite strange. Koi tumhe ye kaam karna hai. 0 Dark 30 koi Pakistan mein shoot hui thi. These are odd. They're weirdly odd. In fact, there's something else that we can show, which is that not only does this need some negativity in the sentence, it needs a particular kind of negativity. Okay. So this is the example in 12b that you've seen. Koi tumhe ye kaam thodi karna hai. This sounds completely reasonable to me. I mean, this is a good sentence. In fact, these sentences, I originally discovered koi by doing corpus searches and saying, what is this? Why is this there? And it kept popping up. Okay. But if you just replace thodi, which is a slightly peculiar negation, with the regular negation of Hindi, koi tumhe ye kaam nahi karna hai, this is not as good. I'm not sure this is bad, but it's not as good. Okay. So there's something additional going on here. Okay. So I'm about to wrap up. So what we need to explain is what contribution is koi making. This is the first challenge. Once again, it's unlikely to be making a structural contribution because there is no structural contribution that needs to be made. So we need to look at the semantics. And this, I want to pull back here because one of the things that was very important in the Paninian system was the idea that syntax and semantics were not to be seen as, from different planets, that they, in the Paninian system, they go hand in hand. And what I would say is that contemporary linguistics of the kind that I do now is now at a point where for at least for many people, that realization has happened. That was not the case when I was in 1991. At that point, syntax and semantics were really quite far from each other. But now I think the idea that problems don't come labeled with syntactic or semantic labels has been accepted. So going back, the thought is that most likely the answer for the contribution of koi is going to come from the semantics. Another thing that's maybe part of this that we would like to explain is why koi is polarity sensitive. You saw that if you remove thodi from the sentence, it's no good. Okay. I want to conclude with just one point, which is that the idea that we need to look at the semantics receives support from the polarity sensitivity. The polarity sensitivity supports the idea that the explanation will come from the meaning. And this is for a very simple reason. Polarity sensitivity is not a syntactic fact. It's a fact about semantics. It's a fact about the semantic property of polarity. Okay. And if expletives, when we say expletives, right, like it and there for English, we say, these are placeholders. They're structural things that you need to make the tree good. They have no meaning. Okay. And if you have no meaning, then why would you care about negation? Okay. So that's the idea. Elements that lack meaning altogether are unlikely to be sensitive to a semantic property like polarity. Okay, I am done. And once again, I want to thank all of you for organizing this and asking me to speak and giving me a chance to express my very deep gratitude and for the mentorship, for the training, for launching me into the world, so to speak, and for the freedom. So thank you.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, hi, Rajesh. So thank you for that lovely talk. I really enjoyed it. And for the gear, it's very interesting because we use it and we come across it all the time. And still, some of these things we are curious because when we are really annotating data, we don't know how to account for it, but we never get deeper into it. So this was really interesting. I was just wondering, Rajesh, this is just a very, very odd thought, that Hindi also has this relative correlative And there is this ghost pronoun which occurs in many of the relative clause constructions, like वह लड़का जो तुम्हारा भाई है वह कल आएगा. The second वह, semantically, if you really look at it, वह लड़का is already there, Joe is already relative, correlative has happened. So what is this वह doing there? And there has been some discussion on it in linguistics literature. But I was thinking, what is it that is it somehow related to the yah that you have discovered? Because this wah could be a very pragmatic wah, because you're
Mhm.
just bringing it again, it's more pragmatic. Whereas this yah could be something like something similar, which is in a way standing. So it is just a comment. I mean, I was just thinking.
Mhm.
And,
So, yeah, no, that's very interesting. The particular construction. So the construction that you mentioned, that it turns out that that is cross-linguistically very common. So there is now a fairly decent amount of work on constructions that are called doubling constructions,
yes,
where basically वो लड़का जिससे तुम बात कर रहे हो वो लड़का मेरा भाई है. So in fact you can even repeat that boy. So this idea, right? So basically these chains where you have two noun phrases which are basically spelling out different parts of the same thing. This and there are interesting questions about when people use this and what the pragmatic consequences of those are. As far as I know, the construction that I described, I have not seen it elsewhere. I know that the yeh construction also is there in Bengali. In Bangla, there is something very similar, but the koi one, that to me is still a mystery.
yeah.
Thank you, though, for the
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajesh. I can't resist asking a question.
Please.
It's wonderful to have you. I remember, the 90s, early 90s. And then later, when I went to America and for the summer,
Yes.
you were coming to India and I said, I'll live in your flat.
Yes, I remember. I did not have a car and I had a cat, and you took me and my cat to the hospital.
And the cat had 5 kittens or 6 kittens.
Yes.
They would crawl into my bed. Yeah, I'm just remembering those times. As in semantics or even pragmatics, as we move from only theta roles to emphasis, etc., perhaps elements that are more properly part of discourse. So the two phenomena or the two kinds of examples you gave, they are structural elements for a new kind of semantics, which is now focusing on emphasis. So therefore, rather than sentence level, I would like to call it discourse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would not. I agree. I think I would. That's exactly the right direction for this, right? So basically, like that's the kind of very abstract idea that I suggested for Ye was precisely that this is basically saying it's connecting you. It's not pointing to an object. It is connecting you to a situation, to some part of discourse, and then it is commenting on that. So it was not my. I do think that these are definitely discourse. The contribution that these things are, I don't really think that these are expletives. Really, the contribution that they're making is at the discourse level.
Yeah. So there's a whole theory waiting to be discovered there.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.